Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 793. I had the black pieces. My opponent went with d4. I went with d5, intending to play the Slav defense if I got a chance, if he played c4 for example, but which is the main move. But he went with knight f3, so indicating that he's going to play one of these queen's pawn sidelines, but he hasn't committed to any particular line. He could still be intending to play the London system, or the Tory attack, or the Colle system, or there are other things. He could also just transpose back into a normal queen's gambit with a later c4. So a very flexible move from white, and I respond knight f6, also a flexible move, and just preparing to meet any of those alternatives. So once again, if he goes c4, I can go back into the Slav defense. Of course, you can always play the queen's gambit declined after c4. But he went with e3, so this is kind of the dividing point. He's choosing which of the various systems he wants. If he wanted the London system, he'd go bishop f4. Tory attack would be bishop g5. But he went with c3, so this is some kind of Colle system. So I went with c5, just putting some pressure directly on the center. And this pawn is not at risk, or if he takes it, I always have the queen check to round it up, so it's not an issue. And he went with b3. So c3 is the Colle system proper. b3 is the Colle-Zukertort. That's what we had in this game. There's also c4, and that would transpose into kind of a Tarrasch defense, it looks like. So that might be interesting. But anyway, he went with b3 here. It's a very solid way for white to play. And actually even it's been played at the top levels a few times recently. Magnus Carlsen tried it out. So it's not a bad way to play, but it doesn't give white a whole lot. He doesn't get a lot of pressure out of the opening, I guess. He's just building up for a slow game. But with all the pieces on, it can lead to some interesting struggles later. So I went with bishop g4 here. Not the most popular choice. I guess at some point black doesn't want to do this maneuver of rounding up the pawn with the queen, because the queen might be a little bit out of place there on the c5 square. So the top two choices here are e6, defending with the bishop, so you can just take back, or c takes d4, just dealing with the issue by taking, which is what I eventually played. But there's actually nothing wrong with this move. I looked at this with a chess engine, and it likes bishop g4 and bishop f5 as well in this position. So those are ideas that are okay at this point. Played bishop e2. Now I go e6. Got to complete my development somehow. Went knight bd2. And now I decided to deal with the problem of this pawn. If I move my bishop, he might just take and force me to move it again. So I decided to go ahead and take now. And I was also thinking maybe it's good to take while his queen's view of the center is blocked. But I don't think in practice, I don't think that makes much difference. White almost always wants to take back with the pawn and just have that extra center control. I mean, he could play this way. He could take with the knight, and after I trade bishops, bring this knight back, take back. And he has a nice open diagonal for this bishop, but he has less control over the center. So I think overall that's fine for black. So it's pretty normal for white to take with a pawn here, even though it seems to block in this bishop. The bishop is also behind the pawn, adding to white's control over the e5 square. So still an interesting way for white to play. I went with bishop d6, and he went knight e5. So at this point, we're finally out of the book. And I think maybe that's a little bit premature. The book move here is castles. Knight e5 just encourages the trades, which I think I want to trade off this bishop, and his queen might be a little displaced on e2. We will see. Just depends on how the game goes. But from a chess engine point of view, all this is about equal. So anyway, I castled here. He went a3. So that keeps my knight or bishop out of the b4 square. And I went queen e7. Actually, the chess engine thinks that black is doing pretty well here after queen b6, probably because that a3 move is cancel that. That a3 move is a little bit slow. So anyway, maybe that wasn't the best move there. But anyway, it's only a slight edge for black even after queen b6. But it is interesting. It's putting some pressure on this pawn, and the chess engine is suggesting that white ought to defend the pawn by dropping the knight back. There are other ways to defend. I'm not sure why it chooses that as the best one. And then rook to c8. It seems like black is just slightly better here. Queen e7 still keeps things around even. He castles. And I went knight d7. This was my idea of how to chase that knight out of the e5 square, which is kind of an annoying piece. He plays f4 and go f6. And now the knight really has to move. So he takes on c6, take back, and then white went g3 here, just shoring up his f pawn. Anyway, this is still rated at about even, so no big mistakes. And even after this move, the chess engine is still thinking we're doing pretty well here. I had to calculate a lot. I mean, it's important to think before you play a move like this, because there's always the danger I'll end up with a piece in front of the queen here that can be subject to some kind of pin on the e-file, but it all works out. Let's see, he took, I took, he took, and I threw in rook takes f1 check because I didn't want him distracted by pieces by taking my rook over here at an inopportune moment. So he took back with the rook, and then I took on e5. So this all seems to be okay. In fact, after rook e1, you know, he's just piling up in this pawn. I can defend with rook e8, and there's no way for him to get more pressure, and it's easy for me. My queen is well defended, so it's easy for me to unpin rather, by moving my knight somewhere. So this is all okay, although it does tend to lead to some exchanges. Anyway, it's white's next move is a mistake. So there's a couple lines. One line given by the chess engine. Both these are rated as even, by the way, just 0 zeros. You could just keep trading. So this would get us into an endgame, kind of like what happened in the game, but even more simplified. And just get a rook versus bishop endgame, where I have a slightly weaker pawn structure. Well, there are just a few more pawns for me to take care of. Anyway, a few more pawn islands, so a few more pawn weaknesses to look after. But the chess engine rates this as even. So that was one way the white could have played. The other way to keep pieces on is just to drop the queen back to d1, and then I might move my queen aside. Queen to f6 is given, which is a bit mysterious because it does walk into a pin from the bishop, but it controls the f3 square, I guess. So he plays knight f3. I can actually take with the queen. You know, he's got the queen defending it, but I have the knight defending the queen. If he takes the knight, I can trade queens and then take back. So it all works out. And this line, if he doesn't play knight f3, at least white has more material on, and that's a way to keep more material on in the game, make it a longer game. Anyway, he went king to g2. I guess was a little worried about a knight coming in here with a fork, although there was not an immediate problem. Well, maybe it was. I guess queen d1 or bishop takes, they both dealt with that, so maybe that was a problem. Knight f3 check. So yeah, he got away from that. Yeah, that's right. Knight f3 check would have won the exchange. But so he solved that by playing king g2. But this actually leaves a tactic on the board, and I was looking for a tactic during the Blitz game, and I just missed it. But here's your chance. You can find the tactic that I missed. Okay, well, it turns out that knight f3 is still a good move, although, let me cancel that. The chess engine gives knight d3 is the best, but either of those moves, either knight f3 or knight d3, if you found them, are good tactics. So what's the idea? If he takes the queen, the idea is I can take the rook with check, and if he takes back, sometimes that works. It doesn't work in this case because I still have the rook on that file. So it just wins the exchange. And knight to f3 similarly will win the exchange. And of course, if he takes the knight, then I win, win the whole queen for a knight, basically. So anyway, that move is just winning the exchange. Too bad I didn't play that. So anyway, I was looking for a tactic, but I didn't spot it. So I went knight g6. He trades. And just kept trading. And then we get into this interesting endgame, which is still about even, but it seems actually this is a little bit easier for white to play than it is for black, maybe because I do have 3 pawn islands. So there's weak pawns. I have more weak pawns than black does, or than white does. So I think, yeah, white has a slightly easier time here. Anyway, I continued with c4. Oh no, he continued with c4. And let's see, I got my king going with king f7. He took. I took. Went b4. Cancel that. He went b4. And, you know, I was trying to find a way to get my knight into the game. I guess this is why maybe white's a little better too, is that my knight from that square doesn't seem to have anywhere it can go. It's just a little tricky. I could have played bishop here, I suppose, and traded down into a knight endgame, but that might be a little bit difficult. And maybe that would have been a better choice. Anyway, I started to regroup my knight with knight f8. The chess engine still thinks I'm okay here, but it is getting harder to play somehow. Let's see, I went g6 here so that I could move my king away, get the pawn out of the glare of the bishop. He goes knight e5 check, go king here, he goes knight c6. And yeah, at this point I'm starting to recognize things are a bit tricky. He's actually hitting the pawn, he's threatening to trade off my bishop, and my knight is out of play. So he kind of caught me with my pieces in an awkward setup while I was trying to kind of unwind and get the knight into the game. But I can still have an okay game here according to the chess engine with the move a6. So this is kind of a funny way to play. So knight b8, he can still win that pawn. King comes over, he grabs the pawn. But my king gets active a little more quickly, I guess, in this line than it did in the game. Knight b8, and the king comes up to b5. And so I get pressure against these queenside pawns, similar to what happened in the game. And it looks like, well, anyway, at first glance, the chess engine thinks I can still hold this. Whereas, see, after knight c6, I saw that I was losing that pawn in any line, so I just went with king d6 immediately. But, well, actually, this is winning for white. Tough to... it shows how difficult endgames could be, I guess, because this is tough to calculate. It's quite a long while before white's advantage really becomes evident. Let's see, but he can take here. So I play knight d7, unwinding, and then he went knight b5 check, and that was not the most accurate move. Actually, the most accurate move here would have been knight to c8 check, because well, the king has to go back, has to stay in touch with the bishop. And after the bishop is taken off, this is just a winning end game for white. You know, it's the bishop versus the knight plus the extra pawn and passed pawns on the outside. This is should be a pretty straightforward win. So he really missed that chance here. So if we go back to this position after knight c6, yeah. So I had to calculate knight takes a7. And that when the knight comes to a7 and I bring my king over, the knight is threatening to come to c8 with check and forcing a trade. Maybe that's not too hard to see. But anyway, it shows the importance of calculating in these endgames. So anyway, back to the game. I went king d6. He took. I went knight d7. And then instead of going with this knight c8 check, he went with this check. Just not quite as strong. Let's see, I went king c6, attacking the knight. Gives another check, and I go over, get my king in front of these passed pawns over here. White should still be winning this game, though. King f2, I go knight e5. He goes king back to g2. So this gives me a little bit of hope. You know, if my king can stay more active than his king, maybe I have some chances. And of course, what he was looking for was he was afraid of these various forks. There's this check. And if the king goes here, there's this check. So the king has trouble coming in on the dark squares, and knight is already controlling that light square. So it makes sense to move the king away from that. But a better move would be to keep the king close to the action and play bishop to c3. And now this bishop is 4 moves away from the knight. so there's no forks on the bishop, at least not for a while. And that'll give his king time to get in the game, and that should be the easiest win for white. And of course, it's still a long game. It's not like it's an immediate win, but he has a winning endgame at this point. king g2, like I said, it gives me some hope, although probably white should still win. Let's see. On knight c4, so I'm hitting his bishop and his pawn, and then I'm trying to bring my king in. So I play bishop to f6 to try and chase this knight away so I can bring my king in to harass these pawns. He goes knight to e6. I go king b5. He goes knight f8. So it becomes a trade. He's hitting these pawns over here, but I'm getting the queen side pawns. So I go here, he takes. And let's see, he's hitting my bishop, so I have to move the bishop. And then he goes knight g5. And now finally I can take the pawn, and I do with knight a3. Although what the chess engine says here is that knight a3 is actually losing. If I want to keep fighting, still with the advantage to white, but I can still fight with this bishop to h6 move. Let's see, he might play h4, and I would go d4. And this is still unclear, I guess, is the best that you can say. The chess engine, searching ahead, at least at the depths I was looking, it does not find a win for white in this position. So at least if there's a win here, it's not a simple one. So that's a way for me to keep fighting. But white still definitely has the advantage. Anyway, I took on a3, and now white should be winning pretty definitely once again. Let's see. He takes off the knight, take off the bishop, and he can bring my king out of position by pushing this pawn forward. So this is good. Bring my bishop over to stop the pawn. Goes knight to e6. Yeah, hitting my bishop. So the bishop, put the bishop in front of the pawn over here. He went knight to f4, forking my pawn, so he's going to pick one of them up. And I started pushing the d pawn. And he played knight takes g6. And I went d3. And even though, technically speaking, white is still winning, he has to find the right move. And right here, this is his chance to find the killer move. So if you want to take a moment here, why don't you see if you can find the move for white. Okay, so the move here is, yeah, pause the video if you want time to think. The move here is knight to e5. It's hitting this pawn, but it has another idea. So I want to keep that pawn. I have to push it forward. I can't defend it with anything. And then he's got this monster fork here. And after that, well, I move my king. He doesn't take the bishop. He takes the pawn, of course. And then it's just all over. I can probably win this pawn, but with the knight and two pawns against the bishop, it is all over. So that should be a win. So right here, d3 was a bit of a mistake. And let's see, king to f1 is the losing move. So right here, even if he, yeah, okay, so I just showed that line with knight e5. So king f1 is a losing move. Let's see, did I have something? I didn't show the alternative to d3. Oh, that's what it was. Other moves lose too, it just takes longer. So I don't know if d3 is really a question mark move, because from an evaluation point of view, pretty much everything loses at this point, and d3 gives me some chances. So I don't know if I agree that's a question mark move, because it gave him the opportunity to make this mistake, and now I'm winning. There's actually no way to stop the pawn from queening. So I go king b2, goes king e1. He can't go to this square or this square because they're covered by the bishop and the pawn respectively. So I go king c2, and now my pawn marches in with check. And so that is a win, and my opponent resigned at this point. So kind of a lucky win, but it shows how difficult these minor piece endgames can be. It really should have been a draw, but it was kind of a little bit tough for me to play from that starting position. And it wasn't obvious to me that was going to be tough at the start. It just was it was just the particular position of my knight, how it was hard to get it into the game, and how I had a few one more pawn weakness than white did. So yeah, white almost converted that game, but in the end I managed to pull it out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Bye.